So in 1899, Charles H. Dewey, who was the director of the U.S. Patent Office at the time, supposedly said this incredible thing. He said, "Everything that can be invented has been invented."
Right, which, I mean, it remains one of the most notoriously short-sighted quotes in modern history.
It really is. Like, just imagine sitting there at the dawn of the 20th century, right before airplanes, the internet, smartphones, and, artificial intelligence,
Yeah.
and genuinely thinking, well, we're done here. Let's pack it up. I mean, it's easy to laugh at now, but it points to a very real, very persistent cognitive blind spot that we all have.
Oh, absolutely. We have this huge blind spot regarding how new ideas actually come to life.
Right. And more importantly, how they survive contact with the real world.
Surviving contact is really the operative phrase there, because generating an idea is, well, it's merely the preliminary step.
Just the beginning.
Exactly. The sources we are looking at today argue that the real friction lies in how organizations intentionally engineer an environment where those fragile new ideas can actually scale.
Yeah, scale without being totally crushed by the existing bureaucracy.
Right.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have a dense stack of sources for you today, including presentations on innovative culture and team interventions, along with a really comprehensive research brief on organizational transformation.
That's a lot of material, yeah.
It is. And our mission for this deep dive into the sources is to figure out the actual mechanics of how organizations build a culture of innovation, how teams execute on it without derailing.
And crucial for you listening, how you can apply these frameworks to whatever you are working on right now.
Exactly.
But what is really fascinating in these sources is why organizations constantly build these massive reward structures for creativity while desperately needing actual innovation.
Right, you see it all the time. Companies pouring resources into these performative brainstorming sessions.
Wow.
They rent some fancy offsite space, they cover the walls in sticky notes, and then they basically just pat themselves on the back for being, creative.
But the sources are clear on this. If none of those wild ideas are applied to create a new product or service that actually holds value, you haven't innovated at all.
You've just subsidized a corporate arts and crafts day.
That is exactly what it is. And that failure to apply the ideas often comes down to a fundamental misunderstanding of what value actually looks like in practice.
So how do the sources define that value?
Well, they break this applied value down into two main types. First, there are product innovations, which are highly visible. Think of like a brand new software feature that directly adds value to the customer.
Sure, the shiny new thing.
Right. But then there are process innovations, which add indirect value by lowering internal costs or maybe increasing quality.
So the customer never actually sees the process change.
Exactly. They never see it, but the organization survives because of it. The problem is process innovations rarely get the same funding or, prestige as those flashy product innovations.
Which means the underlying organizational culture is actually determining what kind of ideas get oxygen.
Yes.
So if we want to understand how applied value happens, we have to look at the soil it grows in, basically.
The structural environment is everything here. The sources utilize this framework that outlines 4 classical types of organizational cultures.
Okay, what are they?
They are hierarchy, market, clan, and adhocracy. And most companies, they naturally drift toward one of the first 3, which fundamentally chokes off sustained innovation.
So the sources paint the hierarchy culture as the ultimate innovation killer, right?
Yeah.
But it's probably worth briefly touching on market and clan cultures to see why they also fall short before we get into the hierarchy.
Yeah, let's look at the market culture first. So this one is relentlessly focused on external competition and market share.
Okay.
It drives fast results, sure, but it tends to foster this really cutthroat internal environment.
Like everyone is just out for themselves.
Exactly. And that destroys the psychological safety required to take experimental risks.
Ah, right. And what about the clan culture?
The clan culture is essentially the exact opposite. It focuses on internal harmony, mentorship, and it acts almost like a family.
That sounds kind of nice, honestly.
It does, right. It has immense psychological safety, but the downside is it often prioritizes maintaining that internal harmony over making the tough, disruptive decisions that true innovation actually requires.
Right. Nobody wants to rock the boat.
Exactly.
And then you have the hierarchy culture, which the sources say is heavily focused on inward integration.
Yes, it prioritizes stability, predictability, and above all else, control.
Reading through this part of the source material, I kept thinking of the hierarchy culture. not just as a fortified castle, but as this rigid information bottleneck.
A castle is a great way to picture it.
Right, because a castle has massive stone walls and maybe like one or two gates. And in a hierarchy, every single new idea has to pass through a single, heavily guarded gate.
Usually a middle manager.
Exactly, a middle manager whose specific job is basically to maintain the status quo.
Yeah.
So the architecture of a hierarchy literally prevents the free flow of unvetted information. Nothing new gets in or out.
And that information flow is a critical mechanism. To achieve sustained innovation, the sources argue you basically have to dismantle the castle.
And what do you replace it with?
You move toward the fourth culture, an adhocracy culture.
Adhocracy, okay.
Yeah, adhocracy emphasizes flexibility and discretion over stability.
Interesting.
Instead of routing all decisions through a centralized command structure, an adhocracy distributes decision-making power out to the edges of the organization.
Oh, to the people actually doing the work.
Exactly, closest to where the actual problems are occurring.
So if the hierarchy is a heavily regulated bottleneck or a castle, the adhocracy is more like a bustling open-air market.
That's a perfect contrast, yeah.
The mechanics are completely different. Like in a market, you don't have one central authority deciding what gets traded.
Right.
You have hundreds of individual vendors actively negotiating, trading information, testing what buyers want in real time.
Yes, and it looks a little messy from the outside.
Oh, very messy, I'd imagine.
But that decentralized routing of information is incredibly efficient for discovering new value.
And that decentralized routing allows for a very specific type of agility, right? The research brief had a fantastic phrase for this.
Oh, the airplane one.
Yeah, it points out that organizational cultures that successfully embrace this adhocracy model make it possible for leaders to fly the plane while rewiring it.
It's such a great visual.
It perfectly captures that operational tension. You are balancing the exploitation of your current profitable markets, keeping the plane in the air,
Right.
with the simultaneous exploration of completely untested markets, which is the rewiring part.
And doing both of those things simultaneously requires an incredible amount of systemic trust.
It really does. And actually, this is a really good moment for you, the listener, to mentally audit the actual mechanics of your own workplace.
Yes, definitely.
Like when you want to test a new process, does it require 3 levels of approval and a formal risk assessment?
Because if so, you are operating inside the castle walls.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or on the flip side, do you have discretionary budget and the authority to just run a small-scale pilot project on your own?
It's a huge difference.
But, an open-air market is completely useless if no one is actually trading anything.
Right.
Which brings up a crucial point from the research. What kind of psychological traits do the people inside this adhocracy actually need to possess?
Because they have to be able to utilize that decentralized power, right? The human element is really what powers the adhocracy.
So who are these people?
The sources identify specific profiles that are vital here. 2 that are particularly essential to scaling innovation are knowledge brokers and mavericks.
Knowledge brokers and mavericks. Let's break those down. The research defines knowledge brokers as individuals who constantly collect ideas from disparate places and then synthesize them in unique ways.
Exactly. They aren't necessarily inventing things from scratch.
They're the cross-pollinators.
Yes. They are the ones who see how, a logistical routing algorithm used in the supply chain might actually solve a data bottleneck over in human resources.
Right. They recognize the structural similarities between seemingly totally unrelated problems.
And to complement those knowledge brokers, an organization desperately needs mavericks.
Or mavericks.
Yeah. Mavericks are individuals who display a distinct irreverence for accepted wisdom.
They just don't care about the phrase, "That's how we've always done it."
Exactly. They actively challenge the deeply held assumptions of the organization.
Okay, so the sources note they play a vital role as a counterbalance, especially as organizations scale and naturally experience a gravitational pullback toward that rigid hierarchy.
Right. They keep the organization honest, in a way.
The knowledge brokers find the weird, valuable connections, and the mavericks have the political courage to push those connections into the spotlight.
Exactly.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second and push back on the reality of managing these profiles.
Okay, go for it.
Because the sources advocate for hiring people who display an irreverence for the rules.
Yes.
In practice, how does a company actually survive a bunch of mavericks?
It's a fair question.
If you have people constantly breaking established protocols, That sounds less like an adhocracy and more like a total human resources nightmare that just bankrupts the company.
Yeah, total chaos.
Well, the difference between a maverick and a liability really comes down to the structural guardrails of the organization.
Guardrails. Okay. Which ties heavily into the concept of psychological safety.
Right.
Innovative cultures absolutely must tolerate ambiguity and failure, but they do so with a massive, non-negotiable caveat.
Which is...
They welcome mistakes that do not jeopardize the survival of the organization.
Ah, okay. So you encourage people to blow up a beaker in the lab, but you establish strict protocols so they can't blow up the entire laboratory.
That is a great way to put it. The goal is to design relatively small-scale, rigorous tests.
Like the old startup mantra.
Exactly, to fail fast and fail cheap. But the sources emphasize that failing is basically useless if it isn't treated as rigorous data collection.
You can't just fail for the sake of failing.
Right, you have to fail fast, fail cheap, and then actually capture the organizational learning.
And that requires a fundamental shift in how human resources actually evaluates performance, doesn't it?
Oh, completely.
Because in a traditional hierarchy, failure is treated as a character flaw or, a lack of competence.
And it affects your bonus.
Right. But the sources suggest that an innovative culture actually designs the HR system to reward failure, provided it was a well-designed experiment.
Yes. You are literally tying performance reviews to the validation of hypotheses rather than just successful product launches.
That's huge. It decouples the individual's worth from the immediate financial outcome of the idea.
And when you structurally reward the quality of the experiment rather than just the success of the outcome, people actually stop hiding their failures.
They stop sweeping it under the rug.
Exactly. They openly share the negative data, which saves other teams from making the exact same expensive mistake 6 months down the line.
Okay, so we've established the decentralized environment of the adhocracy.
Right.
And we have our knowledge brokers and our mavericks operating within systems that reward rigorous, safe experiments.
You've got the pieces in place.
Yeah. Now we have to look at the structural reality of how the daily work actually gets executed.
Right, the day-to-day.
Because one thing the sources heavily emphasize is that the myth of the lone genius is just fundamentally flawed.
We have this cultural obsession, with this solitary inventor having a sudden eureka moment in a garage.
Right, the Steve Jobs myth.
Exactly. But the reality, according to the research, is that most viable innovations emerge from sustained collaboration across entirely different disciplines.
Cross-functional work.
Yeah. Too many organizations try to rely on a siloed research and development department to basically generate all their innovation for them.
Which creates a terrible dynamic, honestly.
It really does.
You isolate a group of smart people, you put a sign on their door that says Innovation Lab, and then the rest of the company basically assumes they no longer have to think creatively.
Right, because it's not in their job description anymore.
Exactly.
And it creates a tremendous bottleneck. The structural solution recommended in the sources isn't a permanent self-contained unit at all.
Okay.
It's the ad hoc interdisciplinary team.
Ad hoc meaning temporary.
Yeah.
Yes.
You bring together individuals from marketing, engineering, finance, customer service to tackle a specific problem.
And then what?
And then you disband the team when the problem is solved.
Okay, the theory is sound, obviously. But throwing a bunch of people from different departments onto a brand new team usually creates a massive amount of friction.
Oh, absolutely.
Because different departments have completely different vocabularies, totally different pacing, and different metrics for success.
It's a clash of cultures.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting. Because the source material gets incredibly practical here with a concept called the team startup or transition meeting.
Yes. The sources fully acknowledge that new interdisciplinary teams almost always experience severe operational lag.
Oh, severe. There's confusion about objectives, dropped handoffs between departments.
Right, opaque expectations from leadership, and just agonizingly slow decision-making cycles.
We've all been on a project like that.
Too many, probably.
For the first 3 months, everyone is just awkwardly trying to reverse engineer how everyone else operates.
You don't know who actually has the final veto power.
No. And the meetings just devolve into endless debates, and everyone is privately complaining to their original managers.
It's a mess. Most teams attempt to work through those fundamental operational issues via trial and error over the course of several months.
Just feeling their way in the dark.
Exactly. However, the sources state that with conscious, structured attention to a formal team startup meeting, All that friction can be compressed into a matter of days.
Days instead of months. The mechanics of this startup meeting are just brilliant. I actually started thinking of it as a project prenup.
Oh, a project prenup. That analogy works really well. Walk us through the mechanics of that.
Okay, so when you sign a prenuptial agreement, you are sitting down to settle potential financial disputes while you still like each other, right?
Before the resentment sets in.
Exactly. So that you don't destroy each other when you're angry later on. The team startup meeting does the exact same thing for a project team.
I love that.
Before the initial excitement wears off and the stress really kicks in, you sit down for a mandatory 2 to 4 hour session to basically hammer out the operational rules of engagement.
It's forced clarity.
Yeah. The sources have a very specific checklist for this. You ask things like, what is our exact matrix for making a decision?
Right.
If we reach a stalemate, who holds the actual tie-breaking vote? What are our strict norms for communication?
And a critical rule for this specific startup meeting, which the sources highlight, is that you are explicitly forbidden from discussing business as usual.
No project updates.
Zero, no status reports, no brainstorming the actual product features.
Nothing.
The entire duration is dedicated strictly to the mechanics of how the team will function as a unit.
Which, honestly, is incredibly uncomfortable for high achievers who just want to dive into the work to feel productive.
Oh, they hate it.
They do. But establishing those rules early prevents hundreds of hours of wasted passive-aggressive conflict later on.
Absolutely. And the role of the team leader in this meeting is also quite specific, which I found fascinating.
What do they have to do?
Well, beyond sharing the overarching vision, the leader is instructed to be radically transparent about their personal working style.
Right.
They are advised to explicitly outline their hot buttons.
Hot buttons.
Yeah, the specific behaviors or situations that will instantly frustrate them. And they have to do this right out of the gate.
Man, imagine the psychological safety that creates.
It's massive.
If a boss sits down on day one and says, look, here is my hot button. I despise being surprised by bad news in front of external clients.
Right.
If a deadline is slipping, tell me privately the moment you know, and we will fix it together. But if you wait until the client meeting to mention it, we're going to have a serious problem.
That removes all the guesswork.
It totally does.
Yeah.
People don't have to spend weeks trying to secretly read the leader's mind.
It clearly defines the boundaries of the sandbox. And once those boundaries and protocols are explicitly understood, the team can spend all their cognitive energy actually experimenting and executing.
Rather than just managing internal politics.
Exactly.
Okay, so the underlying theory makes complete sense. You shift toward an adhocracy, you protect your mavericks by rewarding rigorous experiments,
Right.
and you mandate these project prenups to eliminate interdisciplinary friction.
It sounds great on paper.
But theory often falls apart in practice. So how do these interventions actually hold up when they hit the messy reality of different industries?
Well, the research brief actually synthesizes 3 distinct case studies to demonstrate exactly how this scales across entirely different environments.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, they examine a fast-growing tech startup.
Which is an environment you would assume is already naturally innovative, right?
You would definitely assume so. But rapid growth often triggers this panicked retreat back toward a hierarchy just to maintain control of the chaos.
They build the castle walls out of fear.
Exactly. So to prevent this, the organization utilized an internal consultant to formally structure their ideation process.
Structure it how?
They didn't just hope for innovation to happen organically. They mandated dedicated innovation time for employees.
Dedicated time.
And they built the cross-functional teams we just discussed. This structural commitment directly correlated with a measurable decrease in their time to market for new products.
Wow. Okay, what about the second example?
The second example looks at a regional healthcare organization, which, as you can imagine, operates under entirely different constraints.
Oh, yeah. It's highly regulated. The stakes are literal life and death. And change usually moves at a glacial pace.
Right. In that heavily guarded hierarchy, the intervention was the creation of a physical and operational innovation lab.
But didn't we just say innovation labs don't work if they isolate people?
Yes. But the mechanism that made this one work wasn't the lab itself. It was the composition of the people they put inside it.
Oh, I see.
They intentionally bypassed the traditional hierarchy by bringing clinical staff, administrative personnel, and actual patient representatives into the same room.
Patients were in the room too.
Yes, they co-created the solutions. By forcing those disparate perspectives to interact directly, they completely bypassed the middle management bottlenecks.
And did it work?
It did. They successfully developed novel, streamlined patient intake models that they couldn't have figured out otherwise.
Okay, that's impressive. But let me push back again, just regarding resources.
Sure.
A rapidly scaling tech startup and a major regional healthcare network, they both have significant capital to deploy.
Sure.
They can afford to give engineers dedicated innovation time or to fund a brand new co-creation lab. What happens when we apply these theories to organizations operating under severe resource constraints?
Like they just don't have the money.
Right. Is innovation just a luxury for the well-funded?
It's a really critical question, and the sources use their third case study to address it directly.
What's the case study?
It's a nonprofit organization. Nonprofits inherently face massive resource scarcity, but the research argues that these exact constraints often force a much more strategic behavioral approach to organizational change.
Right, because you can't just buy your way out of a problem with an expensive new software platform.
Exactly.
But there is a massive point of friction here.
Yeah.
In a typical nonprofit, the staff is usually overworked, underpaid, and constantly on the verge of burnout.
Oh, absolutely.
If leadership comes in and cheerfully demands that they innovate, it's not going to be seen as an exciting opportunity.
No, not at all.
It's going to be perceived as just another unfunded mandate added to their already overflowing plates.
Which is exactly why the nonprofit in this case study did not attempt a massive structural overhaul. They knew they couldn't afford a fancy innovation lab.
So what did they do?
They focused entirely on a low-cost, high-impact behavioral interventions designed specifically to claw back wasted time.
Clawing back time. How?
They utilized basic personality and behavioral assessments like DISC and Myers-Briggs.
But, I mean, a personality test on its own doesn't suddenly make a team innovative. How did they actually apply that data?
They used the assessments as basically an operational API.
An API.
Yeah, a way for different human operating systems to talk to each other without glitching.
Okay, I like that.
By mapping out the specific communication styles of the team, they drafted comprehensive team charters based on that data.
So it wasn't just a fun quiz.
No, it wasn't about finding out what personality type someone was for fun. It was about establishing highly structured communication protocols.
I see.
If you have an overworked staff, eliminating the friction of miscommunication is basically the highest leverage intervention you can possibly make.
That makes total sense when you frame it as time recovery.
Exactly.
If understanding someone's communication profile saves you from, like, a 2-hour circular argument every Tuesday morning,
Right.
that's 2 hours you just freed up for actual problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
And it costs nothing but the initial time commitment to sit down and map it out.
And the results from the case study back that up perfectly.
Did they see big change?
Huge. By implementing those structured communication protocols and addressing interpersonal friction head-on, this resource-starved nonprofit significantly improved both their program outcomes and their client satisfaction metrics.
Wow. And they did it without requiring a massive budget increase.
Without spending a dime on new technology.
The through line in all three of these examples, the tech startup, the hospital, and the nonprofit, is that none of them relied on a motivational poster to change their culture.
The sources make a definitive, unequivocal statement on this point.
Let's hear it.
Fundamentally, organizational cultures are not changed by new thoughts, new mission statements, or new words.
Right.
They're changed exclusively by new behaviors that structurally reinforce the cultural attributes you want to see.
Which brings us to the most important question for this whole deep dive.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean for you? If you are listening to this right now on your commute or sitting at your desk, how do you take this dense organizational theory and apply it tomorrow morning?
That's the real test.
It means recognizing that an adhocracy isn't something management just gives you. It's a decentralized network you have to actively build yourself.
Yes.
It means auditing your own processes to see if you are hoarding information like a castle or routing it like a market.
It also means aggressively seeking out diverse perspectives.
Exactly.
Perhaps by deliberately inviting someone from an entirely different operational background to actively critique your next project proposal.
Yes. And it means designing your own workflow so that you can fail cheaply, capture the data, and learn quickly.
Capture the learning.
Right. And above all, it means advocating for a project prenup the very next time you are placed on a cross-functional team.
Oh, 100%.
Demand that initial block of time to explicitly establish the rules of engagement, the decision-making matrix, and the hot buttons.
It will definitely be uncomfortable in the moment.
Very uncomfortable. But it will save you months of operational friction down the line.
Cultivating this type of behavioral change requires really deep, often quite uncomfortable reflection.
It does.
The sources point out that true organizational learning, the kind that leads to sustained innovation, frequently requires the active unlearning of old, deeply ingrained, and often harmful assumptions.
And unlearning a behavior that has previously kept you safe in a hierarchy is infinitely harder than learning a new one.
It is arguably the hardest part of the entire process,
Right.
which is why I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to ponder based on all this source material.
Lay it on us.
If true innovation absolutely requires us to unlearn the past to make room for the future, what is one fundamental, unquestionable assumption about how you do your job right now that you need to completely discard by tomorrow morning?
That is a phenomenal question to end on. Think about the castle walls you might have unknowingly built around your own daily routines and figure out exactly where to blow a hole in the masonry.
Just blow it up.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the sources today. We really hope this armed you with the actual mechanics needed to break out of the hierarchy and start engineering your own adhocracy.
Go build that open-air market.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Keep questioning the status quo, build those guardrails so you can fail fast and cheap, and we will catch you next time.